ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another session of Toward a Quality of Life. We're here in the month of May, year 2005. And if you've watched this show before, you know that there's one and two things that I'm very eager and persistent on, devoted to, as are so many people in the Boston area and around the world. And those are, number one, the environment, which is in perilous condition indeed, critical condition. We don't hear anything about it out of Washington, D.C., so we're certainly wasting a lot of precious time. And secondly, of course, to help animals that are in dire straits in research and other horrible circumstances. Tonight, we're going to focus on the environment issue, and the environment in terms of seawater, the great big ocean world that is more of this globe than land in terms of area that it takes up. And it's something pretty much many and most of us, if we don't live and work by the sea, have very little awareness of. And I'm sure if you've gone to the ocean sometime and have had the privilege and pleasure of looking at the stuff, quote unquote, that's in the water, you may often wonder what the heck it is. And it certainly looks very different than what is on land. So the ocean is a whole other territory, a vital territory, and we're here to speak about some of the way that it is needing to be more healthful and is at the present time, unfortunately, of course, being despoiled and transgressed due to human actions, as usual. For this purpose, I have with me MIT Professor Judith Pederson, I believe she pronounces it, excuse me, who is a marine ecologist. So an ecologist is someone who studies how everything fits together in the natural world, how things work relatedly, and how the whole environment and natural environment functions together. And welcome Judith Pederson to our show this evening, Dr. Pederson.
Oh, thank you. Judy is fine.
Judy is fine. You're part of MIT Sea Grant, or you're head of that. What is the Sea Grant?
Sea Grant is one of 30 offices throughout the country that focuses on marine issues. We fund research in fisheries, trying to make sure that they're sustainable. At times they've also tried to be able to grow aquaculture facilities.
Tell us what aquaculture is.
Aquaculture is taking organisms such as shellfish or fish like salmon and growing them in certain conditions, maybe in nets in the ocean or perhaps in tanks in the inland environment, and making sure that these organisms are healthy, and then you can use them to feed, obviously, people. So sometimes when you buy salmon, for example, it's come as an aquaculture fish grown in these pens offshore.
Right, you'll notice when you go to the deli or the fish area that it'll have wild-caught salmon at a higher price and fishery salmon at a lower price. And there have been some complaints about the fishery salmon.
The wild-caught salmon?
No, the fishery one.
The aquaculture salmon. Mm-hmm. Here in the U.S., it's fairly well regulated, but some countries probably add some chemicals to keep the cages clean because you want to make sure there's good water circulation, or they feed the fish, or they have too many fish together and they won't grow and won't be as healthy, or they've taken too long to ship them. So sometimes there are problems. Mm-hmm.
And also I heard too that they may be living in their own waste too much in some of these environments.
In some environments, it's, yes. At times that will actually kill the whole aquaculture cage. So there is a little bit of a feedback loop for the person who's growing them. But yes, that is a problem at times as well.
So when you're saying, let's understand this, you're saying aqua meaning water, from the Latin A-Q-U-A, aquaculture, as opposed to agriculture, meaning that people are now farming sea animals, sea organisms, I should say, in nets Or in harbor areas, I suppose?
Near harbor areas, in tanks that might be right along the edge of the ocean. Yes.
Or they put up like some kind of barrier.
Sometimes they put barriers up. That's how they actually often grow shrimp, is in barriers.
How does that help to do grow fish and shellfish and so on? How does that help to do it that way?
Well, obviously you can feed them extra food so you can get a much larger culture, and you're not exposing them to diseases that they might face in the marine environment, or if you see a disease occurring, you can take care of it. Especially for finfish. The other area where it helps is that you're able to produce a very large fish in a very short period of time, because in the wild they're exposed to predators, they're always swimming away from things, their food source may not be as consistent. So you're able to produce a large fish, short period of time, get it to the market, and to some extent if you're in an area where you're limited in protein, this is not a bad thing. You know, you are helping to feed the world, as it were.
Well, yes and no. I mean, apparently the oceans are overfished, is what we're told.
Well, they definitely are overfished.
They're overfished,
yes.
And there would be enough if we took care ecologically and environmentally to protect the oceans and let the fish run the way they would run, and did everything more properly, everything in a balance. I also noticed that the flesh of the wild-caught salmon appears very different from that of the aquaculture salmon.
Well, I think that's because it's a different species. It probably comes from the West Coast, whereas most of the aquaculture salmon, even the ones that are aquaculture on the West Coast, are Atlantic salmon, and they have a different color flesh than the king salmon and the coho and so forth. So there are about 5 or 6 different species of salmon that hit the markets.
And I have to throw in this, too, that, you know, farming fish or sea organisms this way is also just another method of corporate control of the product, just like they have longer shelf life and ways of preserving things longer, storing them, knowing how they're going to look. Different processes that they put on foods and into foods and around foods, so that there's a control and a predictability and a control over the production and the delivery and containment of what they're bringing to market, so to speak.
Yes, that's true to some extent. Although, because fish are so fragile, actually, you have to really get it frozen fairly quickly if you want to have a longer life in the market. So, if you see fresh fish, it should be there within a few days of when it was caught.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying they can control, like, instead of having fishermen come in with a poor catch or with low weight fish, they can control how fat they are, you know, and when they're going to be ready to market and all those kinds of things.
Well, I think the fishermen are facing a different problem these days, which is just to catch it altogether.
The people that own these aquaculture enterprises.
Yes, that's true.
And also, I heard Julia Child say once that if you freeze fish, you lose all the protein value. She said frozen fish loses its protein value. I don't know. But so much to say about the ocean. And much to my surprise, Dr. Pederson has brought some specimens. Did you go down to the waterfront today to get these specimens?
Yes, I had a meeting in Boston near the waterfront, and I knew where these organisms were growing. So I walked over to the wharf that had a floating dock, which means that the dock is always in the water, and the organisms grow at that water's edge down to the bottom of the float that, you know, they use in marinas. So I knew where these docks were, and I knew that I would find some animals on them. So I went down to the docks today, yes.
So the kind of animals that you're looking at mostly and researching about are the kind that are growing on things. What do you call those kind of animals that cling to stuff, that grow on it?
Well, we would refer to this as a fouling community. It's a community that grows on a hard surface. So it could grow in a rock. It could grow on these floats that are usually plastic or cement sometimes, or even just styrofoam. And these organisms will attach to that. My interest and the organisms I brought in today are mostly introduced species, and they've been introduced by humans to this region via a number of different pathways. Sometimes they come in by ballast water. Sometimes
Tell us, what is ballast water?
Ballast water is the water that they use to keep a vessel stable in the ocean.
You mean those big ships
Those
that
big
go on the ocean?
Commercial ships, and for us, I think the Toyotas were brought in by some of these very large container ships.
How many Toyotas can fit on one of those, do you know?
I have no
Are
idea.
they bigger than a football field?
Some of them can be, yes. Some of them
And
can
they
be.
have-
I'm not sure the ones that come into Boston because we're a fairly small port, but they're large.
What's a big port?
New York, Long Beach in California, and some of the other ports.
What makes a port big? The amount of coastline or the depth of the water?
The depth of the water and the width of the channel that allows the vessel to come in.
I see.
So one of the largest vessels that we have coming in is the LNG tankers, the liquefied natural gas. Yes. And so that, you know, they actually stop most of the traffic to allow it to get into the berth because it's really very, very narrow for it. once
So
it
they
gets
get
up
the
there.
priority.
They get a priority when they come in once a month or more often during the winter
And that's the one
months.
the mayor was worried that terrorists could strike at a natural gas
Yes.
tanker, and I don't think that's been resolved.
No, but the other large, we also bring in oil because we don't have a natural supply here, obviously, so that's another one that comes in. So when these vessels come in, they unload the oil, and in order to go back out into the ocean and in order to be stable in the ocean, they need that weight. And so they take on water from Boston Harbor, and they go out
What
into
are they,
the ocean.
the open portals, or suck it in, or how does
Yes, it's basically, yes, it's a big hole, and they have a pump, and they bring it in and put it into various places in the boat. Sometimes it actually helps to keep the boats having structure, so you have space between the outer hull and the inner hull, and there are, you know, sort of joints that hold the hull in place, and so the water comes into these areas. And sometimes in the big oil tankers, it used to be that they would just take the oil out and put oil in, and if they do that, they have to go to a special place to get rid of their ballast water. But otherwise, they dump the ballast water in the ocean as they're chugging along, going into a port.
Are you saying the double-hulled ones?
There are
the
double-hull ones probably have the water in the outside hull.
So they can dump it.
So they can dump it outside.
And there aren't a lot of double-hulled ones.
There are more and more.
There are more
I
and
think
more
they
because
have
it's
to,
mandated
yes,
by
they
a
have
certain year.
Right. I think we all know about the spill in Buzzards Bay.
Buzzards Bay, Exxon Valdez broke my heart forever.
Yes,
it was
but
the end
Buzzards
of my
Bay
heart
was-
as I know it.
Buzzards Bay was just a few years ago, and that was a single-hulled
That's
vessel, as I
still a
recall.
single-hulled. Yeah,
Yes.
I think 2006 was the cutoff for.
Right, so
but
in
I'm sure
another
they're
year.
still behind. I'm sure they'll still be getting by. So they have the water in the
Yes.
hull, or else they have it if it's a single hull. Where do they have the water?
They have special tanks that are
Tanks
for the...
around, and if it's
certainly
in there,
you-
they can't put it in the
Right.
harbor because the oil might have been in there. Is that why?
No,
or-
if they had oil in those tanks, they couldn't.
Yeah.
But if the tank is just for ballast water, then they can discharge it in the ocean, or in the port, or in the ocean. And what they realized, of course, early on, is that when you're pulling up the water from a harbor, or from the ocean, but from a harbor, say, there are lots of little animals and plants that live in there, including the small larvae of many of the animals that grow.
What's larvae?
Larvae are the...
Harveys, larvae, yeah.
Larvae are the juveniles. They're like our little children, 2, 3, 4-year-olds.
Some people might object to that, but yeah.
They're very young.
They're the beginning.
And yes, and as beginning
Do the
organisms.
larvae not look anything like what the...
No, they don't, and they
That's
often...
why they're called larvae.
They change. That's right.
They change
their
into
form
something
into
else.
something else to look like the adult eventually. So all of the most of the organisms that I have here have a life stage that is in the water column, whereas these animals are found on these hard surfaces. So that means they change from an animal that was swimming in the ocean to an animal that attaches to a hard surface, and they made that
When
change,
they're
which is
larvae,
called
what are they doing?
metamorphosis. Some of them have their own food source with them, and they're just swimming around for a little while and attach. Others are out in the plankton for maybe a month or
What's
so.
plankton?
The plankton are this group of animals and plants that live in the water column for some period
When you
of
say
time.
water column, what do you mean?
Well, if you think of your bathtub, The water column is the water that's above the bottom and away from the sides. That distance between the top and the bottom I call the water column. The bottom is the sides. So if you think of that as the ocean, the bottom of the ocean is mud and sand and rocks, and the top of it is just water until it hits the edges.
And then different organisms will live at different levels of the column?
They live at different levels in the water column. They move, some of them move up and down, and some of them feed on those other little animals and plants that are there. Some animals and plants live in the ocean, in the water column all the time. The ones that I'm showing you today have a short period of time in the water column, and then they attach to a hard surface.
They attach, and so it's when they're in the larvae stage or the young stage, they're in the water, and then in the more mature stage, they're attached.
That's correct.
And how long do they live?
It depends. Some of them live 1, 2, 3, 5 years. And some of them don't live very long when we have hard winters and ice that shears them off. And they're very susceptible to predators.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Crabs.
Crabs like these things that we're going to see?
Crabs like some of these things. The things that I'm going to show you today, there aren't many things that like them, and that's because they came from another country, and when they came in from this other country, they didn't necessarily bring their predators with them, and that could be a disease, it could be a parasite, it could be a bacterium, it could be some crab that likes them in their home country, but that crab doesn't exist here, and so they flourish. And
so you're saying they
survive very
came
well.
in with this water, that's the ballast water of the tankers, is mostly how you're saying these critters got here, and they don't belong here naturally, so to speak. They're from other areas of the world.
That's correct.
And they don't quite fit because they don't have any natural predators like bacteria or disease or actual organisms to eat them, and then they multiply and stifle out other life? Is that the idea?
We call it outcompete other life, yes. And I don't want to say they don't have any other predators or any diseases, but they don't have the full complement. You know, when we get sick, we can get a flu bug, we can get a cold virus, you know, we can have some sort of a parasite inside of us. So we have lots of, and we could get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something. So we have lots of things that could be our predators. But when these organisms come, they maybe come with half of their predators, or some of them, or some of the local species actually also will eat them, but not as much as they
and
do
so,
other things.
well, let's look at them, and then we'll talk a little more. Now, we're going to put the camera on these, and we'll take a look at how this is. You know, when you go...
Well, I'm going to start with the easier one first. How's that? I'm going to start with this little guy. So I don't know if you can see him or not. This is a sea squirt.
Just one moment. We're going to get a camera on this. There we go. There we go.
Okay. And they're called sea squirts because, if you notice, they can squirt out a little bit of water. You can see it dripping out. If he were a little happier.
And you know what? Hold it where your cloth is light. It shows. Okay. There we go. Yes.
Better. Okay.
Yeah.
So this particular animal is fairly young. It's probably only about a year old. It's called a rough sea squirt because its outer tunic is...
Tunic? What do you mean it's outer tunic?
Or its outer skin, but it's a little thicker than just a regular...
Is that like calamari? I'm getting hungry. No, is that what does calamari have a tunic?
No, I wouldn't say calamari has a tunic. It has a muscle layer around the outside of it. However, they do eat these in Taiwan and China.
They do? Yeah?
Yes, they really do.
They eat these?
You would cut it open, and the inside, which is basically a basket of lots of little hairs that filter out organisms from the water, and its intestinal tract and some gonads. The gonads are its reproductive structures, and that's what they eat. They fry them, they
Let's
put
see
them
if we
into
can
freezing
get
things.
some other shots. See this? What's this?
This is another one, and the reason I showed...
We might as well just stay on the sea stuff here. Yeah.
This is this one is called Siona, or the vase tunicate, and it doesn't show as nicely...
you know what? It's like jelly. It's
Yes.
like a jellyfish that doesn't sting.
It's a very soft one, but this one's nice because you can see that orangish thing, which are its digestive organs like we have, like the pancreas and the liver, and then you can see a darker little circle here, and that's its intestinal tract, and it shows you that it's probably...
Let's see, I got to show you the darker circle.
Yeah. You're better at this than I am.
Oh, yeah, there's the
Darker circle.
Yeah.
And that's its intestinal tract, and it shows you that it was eating algae, small plants in the ocean.
Because it's got like a translucent body, so you can see
Right.
everything inside, sort of like a
Right.
purse that's made clear and you
Exactly.
can see all the contents.
Right.
So it's attached to this tunicate squirt.
They're both tunicates. They're both sea squirts.
Are they attached to each other?
This one is attached to this one, and this one was attached to a either the float or maybe to a I can't remember. I pulled a wire or a string out of the ocean, and so it might have been attached to that. And that's another interesting thing. So once you have this type of an organism, lots of things grow on it. And I have another one here where I can show you other species that are actually growing on this particular sea squirt. It's the same species as the first one I showed you with the
Now-
rough skin, but it has an orange colored organism growing here, a little bit of a yellow one here, and one that we call a star tunicate.
Oh, God, this is amazing. Oh, I need my glasses too, but you should see this. This is the jelly kind that
That's
we
the
just
jelly
talked
kind
about
that we
right
just
there.
talked about.
This orange thing is what?
It's a whole colony of these same sea squirts, only they're very small. They're like as thin as a pencil lead, and there are thousands of them in this one.
Why does it come out
1,000 in
orange?
this one.
Why does it? And there's a yellow colony. Why do they come out? You can't even see the colors too well.
It's
but
kind of like, why do you have blue eyes and brown hair? Or
Really?
blonde hair and brown eyes. Yes, so these are all different genetic strains of the same. These two are different genetic strains of the same species. This is a different species, and sometimes this is that color, and sometimes it's a very dark color. Sometimes it's golden.
you should see this one. It's got these little white patterned organisms embedded in black, so they look
Right.
like beads almost or something.
And like the other ones, they also have a tunic growing over them, and they have a siphon that brings food in one siphon and out the other siphon. So they have exactly the same body structure once they become adults as the other organisms.
And what's this lumpy thing underneath all of it?
This lumpy thing underneath all of
Yeah.
it is the same
Same thing
sea
as you
squirt
showed
that
me
we
there.
showed before.
And what's these hairs hanging down here?
These hairs hanging down are, they're called hydroids, and they're related to sea anemones, which most people know.
Wait
that
a minute, sea anemones. I used to call them sea anemones. Sea anemones, A-N-E-M-O-N-E-S, anemones.
That's correct.
What are anemones?
Anemones are
Or
based...
enemies, anemones.
Anemones. Anemones are animals that have little tentacles, little tentacles, again with hairs on them, and they filter out feed organisms from the water, and they bring them into a stomach, they digest them, and then what they don't want, they just throw back out through the same opening that they brought them in. So here, each one of these little tubes, which you probably can't see very well when I do that, is an individual animal. So these are growing again as
Each
a
of
colony.
these strands.
Each strand.
And there are many of them.
And
It's
there are
sort
many
of
of
like
them.
matted hair right
It's
now.
like matted hair.
Matted grass.
Yes. And when I was out there today, I actually found a sea slug that was eating them.
Ugh, slug sounds terrible. Oh, slug sounds terrible.
Well, he's not one of the more. He's not one of the.
I'm supposed to like all life. That's what I preach. All life is beautiful and wonderful.
And I
Listen,
can't get him
are
out.
these, well, wait. I want to ask you: are these animals knowing? Oh God!
Oh,
Do we have a little? Could we get in on this, Henry? Henry Lopez is doing camera for us. Slug. He looks like a.
But he's a happy camper.
Leech. He looks like a leech.
No, he looks like the garden slug
I
that
don't
would
have
eat your
my-
plants. That's
Really?
what that's
Oh.
exactly what he's related to. And he's a happy camper because he's eating these little sea
So he attaches
hydroids.
to them and eats them, huh?
Yes, yes. And if he were, when
Is
he's
he
in
alive?
yes, he is.
Oh dear.
And when he's in the water,
inside?
again, he has little
You'd
tentacles
never-
on the back of him. That,
You'd never know
Beautiful.
this. This would just look like a speck of crud. If you were
Exactly.
uninformed in the ocean, it would just look like
That's right.
filth, actually.
Right. Some animals can get quite large and have very large tentacles on the back of them, feathery tentacles, and they're quite beautiful, actually. but this guy is...
Is this slug native to the area?
This guy is probably native to this area, yes, and he can adapt and feed on other animals.
Now these that we looked at, are they native to this area?
These animals are not native to the area. The one with the one that you said feels like a jellyfish,
yeah,
that one we don't know whether it's native or not. So when we look at animals, we divide them as native animals, introduced animals, or what we call unknown. We don't know where they came.
Meaning they might have come from a place other than the area.
Oh, they definitely came from a place other than the area, and they came because of human activity.
Mainly probably through ballast water.
Through ballast water. There are a bunch of other ways they could come, too.
What other ways could they come?
Well, if somebody lived in a warm environment and took these marine organisms and dumped them back in the ocean from their aquarium, that's one way. So humans, when you have
Would they
pets,
have these in their aquarium?
They could have some of these in their aquarium,
could?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So one pathway is people dumping their aquaria back in the water, whether it be fresh water or marine water. And we really have a campaign now to ask people not to do that, to take the animals back to the pet store where they bought them and let somebody else enjoy them for a while. The other way is aquaculture. And
again, farming organisms in the water.
And I'll just show you by showing you this one. Underneath this orange.
Yeah, let's put it up against the white.
Yes. Underneath this orange tunicate is the native mussel. And you can see he attached to it.
And there's a tunicate. Look at that. It looks like pimento.
It does.
It looks like the peppers you get in a jar.
Right.
And it's a tunicate. We're going to be eating here pretty soon.
Well,
we'll just steam this mussel.
The mussel we could steam. I'm not so sure about the tunicate.
So the mussel is local or what?
The mussel is a native species, right?
Yeah. And there's a little mussel growing on the big mussel.
That's right. Well, yes. And
is that a baby?
Yes, this is a small one. It's probably was this year's spat.
How does a mussel get born?
Well, the male and the females release their eggs into the ocean.
Yeah.
They fertilize because they're all growing in a clump usually, so they're really next to each other. And then the little larvae swim around for a couple of weeks, and they settle, as this one did, on pieces of algae, on adults, on just about any surface at all. And then they start to grow. They attach by these byssal threads. You can't see the thread itself, but they and this one is almost off.
Looks like a piece of hair.
Right, it looks like a piece of hair. Here's some more from the adult. And what's interesting about these byssal threads are they're protein that the mussel puts out and attaches to something. And the other one that I brought...
Now he's moving. He wasn't moving before.
Yes, this is a little crab. And they certainly, as you can see, they walk sideways.
Whoa.
I thought he was an introduced crab, and it was the green crab, but I was mistaken. And not only is it not a he, it's a she. And I can tell by turning it over and looking at the bottom, and there is a little piece.
Let's look at this crab, Henry, if we could get it. Yeah.
This little piece is a V inside, and if it's real thin, it's a male, and if it's real thick, it's a female.
Can we get the crab? Just a minute. We're waiting for the crab.
And I'm supposed to be on white here. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
So right where my fingers are, there's a little V part of the animal.
Oh, yeah. Can you see the crab moving a little bit?
And yes, you can see his
Some
legs.
people will think it looks like a tarantula.
No,
but it's just a little crab.
It's a crab. It actually goes up to be a good sized crab,
Does
and people
it?
eat it.
So it's a baby.
So this is a native species, yes, and it's a female. And when it goes up, it will hold its eggs under its body like that until they hatch, and it releases them into the water.
And you said it's a native species.
Yes.
Now you found this right down at the waterfront.
Yes, I did.
Whereabouts at the waterfront?
Near the big hotel, the Rose Wharf Hotel, where there are lots of the ferry boats go in and out.
Oh, so life can still live around there, huh?
Oh, yes.
Is it clean over there?
It's cleaner than it was 10 years ago.
It's not really clean, but it's clean.
It's cleaner.
Cleaner.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we still have a lot of road runoff coming into the ocean, so it's hard to say that it's going to be completely
like salt from the winter? How about that?
Salt from the winter, yes. There's a sponge. This doesn't look like much of anything.
Let's have a look at what the sponge looks like, if we could, please.
Yes. try to be on against. It's yellow, and it looks
Oh yeah,
a
you
lot
can't
like.
see it. Let's see if there's a light in which we can see it. Does this show?
Probably not. The reason I brought it was it looks a
Higher?
lot like some
Does
of these
this
other
show?
things.
How's this one? Oh yeah, there. See, there are certain lights.
Yeah.
Is this the same kind of sponge you use that's natural sponge when you wash your car?
It's related to
It
those.
looks like it.
It looks like it, but it
Is
doesn't
this
grow that big.
Is this a whole organism?
It's a whole organism,
It
and
is?
they may get to be as big as your fist, but that's about
it. It just looks like a piece of sponge. Yeah, and junk. It just, who would know this is alive?
I know.
Where do these fit on the genealogical tree?
These are what we would call very primitive animals.
These are primitive?
They're primitive. They have little.
Geez, they don't have wars, do they?
No, they don't have wars. They also just have little holes that they bring food in and get food out, and they actually stand in a water column in a way that the water helps move that particles in and out.
Mm-hmm. Passive. They're very passive.
That's right. They don't move at all, and they don't have body parts that move very much. And then there is just one other sea squirt that grows on its side. It's a white one.
Let's put it up. Ooh, it just squirted. Wow. Let's do it. How about this? Can we get that? It squirted.
Isn't this fun? Don't you want to come with me?
It squirted. I love looking at sea animals. There we go. There we go. This little thing squirted out. It's sort of translucent. You can't see it, but it's like a sack.
It's like a sack, and it has very rough skin also. You can find little bumps. And when it gets big, and in some lights, you can see a nice pinkish tinge to it.
Why has it got this stuff on it?
Because that's where it attaches.
Stuff.
This one attaches to its side, unlike the others that attach upright.
No eyes, no mouth, nothing. Looks like a stone.
No eyes, but
until you touch it.
Yeah, but a lot of animals have a light-sensitive...
Photosensitive.
Yes. Receptacle that you can call an eye, and when you pass your hand over it, it will retract or it will close its
oh yeah?
tentacles.
Oh.
Yes.
I see. I see. And you know what I saw in here before? What's this?
That's just a baby, one of these big guys.
You know what you'll show this. Oh, look at this. Oh.
This is the,
and what's that, the digestive tract?
That's the digestive tract.
You can see it right in there. Now, let's get this even higher. Don't squirt, you squirt. And right in there you can see the whole digestive tract.
And you can see...
It's translucent, and then you can see the digestive tract.
And you can see the two little bumps. And you can...
the way it takes stuff in and lets stuff out.
Right, and here we can actually see the lines of the place where the food comes in and it gets treated, it gets filtered. So the good stuff stays and the bad stuff goes away.
You know, because fundamentally, poets have remarked, and maybe others have, maybe even anatomists have remarked, that life is nothing but one big cloaca. And a cloaca is what? Your whole digestive system, from your mouth to your bottom to your anus, so that all that life is in and out. And these creatures are certain and primitive, certainly representative of that, observation.
So
yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else that we have here.
Tubes. Yeah. Ooh, what a feeling. Now you see, these things to me, and when I've spent many an hour walking, as so many of us have, walking the ocean shore, because I'm scared of what might be in the water.
You don't need to be.
Walking the ocean shore. I don't want anything touching my legs. Ooh! And you know, looking at things like starfish. If you're lucky, you don't see them very much.
No.
Yeah, those are they extinguishing or?
No, it's just that they don't tend to be up near the edge of the water. They're a little bit deeper. So if you're there at low tide, you might see them, but during high tide, they're underwater. Right.
And then you see so many of those hermit crabs, is it? The big ones that look like tanks. You see so many of those and various other things. But when you look at what you're showing us here today, you're just ignorant of it. You're just like, you know, the tide's bringing it in, the tide's taking it out, the waves are waving it around, and it just looks like guck in the ocean. Not guck, but ocean stuff. You know, you don't think of it as life forms. I mean, I don't think of it as life forms.
I don't know
you
what to say. I do.
Yeah.
Yes. No, but and they all have, all of these animals, whether they're native or non-native, do perform a service. You know, we have nutrients that come into the water. Let's not talk about the human addition of the nutrients. Nutrients being nitrogen and phosphorus that plants need to make oxygen to, you know, keep oxygen coming for us. But if you didn't have something feeding on that, then we just have a lot of plants, but we wouldn't have anything else. So these animals help to keep those organisms growing all the time, so that you always have new organisms coming in. And so they all have a service, or as it were, or a place in the ocean. So whether they're native or not native, very often they may do the same thing. The problem with these non-indigenous species is that they are really changing the community that we know, the native community, and we have concern about that.
When you say non-indigenous, please tell us what that means.
Non-indigenous means these introduced species. There are three terms that I'll use, is usually non-indigenous or introduced or non-native, and when they're really, really nasty animals, sometimes we call them invasive, as in, you know, an alien species
like an epidemic.
In. That's right, yes. And there is a species, actually, we have some photographs, and there's a species that I'm really quite concerned about because it is extremely invasive.
First, if we can take a look at some of these photographs. First, we have just a typical dock.
These are the floating docks, yeah, that I was talking about.
A typical dock. We'll wait for the camera to get on there, or to bring that up. Yeah, your typical dock. I've got a little glare there. And it's to the bottom and the poles and the underside of this that a lot of these...
These are scientists, actually. We bring together scientists who are specialists. You see, the people who know the tunicates don't always know what the hydroids look like and so forth. So these are a group of scientists who know all these different animals and plants that are on these docks and can tell us whether they're native or non-native.
So it's species looking at species.
It's one way of looking at it, Nancy.
And then we're going to keep on with pictures here, so you can keep us, focused on pictures.
This brownish organism here is the most common snail we have in New England. It feeds on algae, it scrapes other things off the rocks, and it keeps our rocks kind of clean. You can see there's not too much growing on the area around it. What's interesting about this particular species is that it is an introduced species. And we don't know what the environment would have looked like before it came, because there's really no other snail that feeds on this algae. So if you show the next next picture, it shows a map, I think you have to do it this way, of this animal having arrived in 1840 all the way up here in the northern part of Nova Scotia and Canada, and it migrated itself down to Boston area in about 40 years. So in the 1870s it was down here, and then it went on down all the way down to Delaware. And this is very typical of an introduced species. It starts in one place and then it moves out along the way. This species, remember I was telling you about aquaculture, right? This is an aquaculture species here. This is an oyster. It's called the European edible oyster. And it has, you can see this orange patch here. It's the same orange patch that we showed before. So it's an introduced species, and people have been moving them up and down the coast because they like to eat them.
These they can eat.
These they can eat.
You mean it got here through ballast water? Or
no, they brought this in deliberately.
Deliberately?
Yes.
They wanted to farm it or harvest it, put it in the water and have it grow.
This is just I included this slide.
You can keep those captions on longer of what we're about,
This slide shows 4 squares, actually, that my students have put out in the water, and they're trying to follow changes as a result of either the species that are in the water, so one of them is mussels mostly, and the other 3 show an awfully lot of the tunicates. And so, you know, if you have 4 things, they show that 3 of them have these introduced species and only 1 has the native species on it. So we're looking at how these things interact with each other. And that's an experiment. And we do that with plates, and we dump
So
them
you
down
put
in the
them
water.
together, and
Yes.
then you see that one of them becomes most of it and the others dwindle maybe or something like
Yes, and everybody can do this in their backyard, right? This is a big brown algae, and it just shows a small animal. It's a name called a bryozoan. You wouldn't really know it. It just grows very flat and it can grow over that whole kelp and break it off. And the interesting thing...
It grows over kelp, you said?
Kelp is the brown algae. And the interesting thing about kelp is that it is one of the fisheries. The fish like it because it hides them. They can swim through it, and it's sort of a refuge. So when you break it off, then you lose that habitat for the fish. So here we are overfishing, and then we do things with these introduced species that hurt some of our native plants and make the ecosystem less
So you have
adaptable.
brown kelp and green kelp. Is that right?
Brown kelp, green algae, and red algae.
Oh,
Brown,
the
green,
kelp
and
is,
red. Yes, kelp is brown always. Yeah.
And kelp is brown, and then
Yes.
the other is algae.
Well, they're all
big,
algae.
They're all algae.
Yes.
But the kelp is
Yes.
the brown algae.
Yes, I do have a later picture of another green algae, but I didn't bring many. This is ballast water. You can see the 2 ballast water tanks, and the person would probably be up to about here. So these tanks can be 2 or 3 people high, if you can imagine. They're huge, huge. They're the size of this room, for example. So a lot of animals can live in there. I was telling you about this very aggressive animal that we have. This is part of a map, and this is George's Bank, where most of our fish come from, actually, our ground fish. It's a very productive area. The black lines are lines where boats come through there, and they can be releasing their ballast water. These 2 pictures down at the bottom are a tunicate that is growing over the bottom of the ocean, and I've showed you where the pictures were taken. And if we look at the next slide, or the next photo, you can see how this animal grows over the scallop shells and the rocks. This is a live scallop shell that they fish for out there. This is a very productive area for shellfish and for ground fish, for cod and haddock. And the next one shows how this animal can look inshore. So it grows not only offshore, which is in very deep water, but also near shore. And this is the first time in this area that we've seen an animal that grows offshore that's threatening our fisheries. And we don't know what's going to happen.
Grows offshore? Oh, meaning deeper.
It's in the deeper water
Deeper
offshore,
water.
yeah. Near shore to me is. And then this just simply shows you there's a little yellow patch, and that is the area that's covered, and almost all of that area is covered with these animals. So we don't know what's going to happen. It's going to feed and compete with the scallops
What's usually
out there. Small animals that grow, and then the scallops that are feeding on the phytoplankton and the zooplankton.
Scallops are in shells, right?
Yes, they're bivalves. They're
Bivalves. Like
clams,
what are those
like
called?
clams.
Maracas?
Yes, like maracas. That's right. And this is one of the.
This is crabby.
This is the crab. That's right. This is
crabby.
This is called the Asian shore crab, and he's feeding on mussels and bivalves near shore.
And we want him around, the Asian.
No, we don't want him.
He's an invader?
Oh, yes.
He's an invader. Okay.
He went from Delaware all the way to Maine in 12 years. So he needs just a little guy. And then this just simply shows you that there are other species out there that look like him.
All right, I think we're going to stop here because we're going to be ending shortly now. So what looking at this, you realize how full of life the ocean is, just teeming with life. And a lot of nice edible life, too.
You want the crab, huh?
I don't eat crabs and lobster. I feel bad for lobsters, living in tanks, and it really breaks my heart. I can't stand to look at it. And I think the way they're kept, they're not under a lot of pressure because they're in shallow water. It's not dark. They can see right through people can look at them, poke at them, and their claws are tied up. It's just horrible. And they have to wait for what certainly they sense is a fate of fatality. So I don't eat them, and I don't eat the crabs for this. They throw them in the boiling water. And it's too much for me to take. But I must admit I do eat mussels. Mussels. But anyway, so you see that it's teeming with life. I love the ocean. Do you love the ocean?
Oh, obviously, I wouldn't be doing this.
I love the ocean.
Out there in my good clothes.
And a lot of persons who are watching, who are thinking of what they would like to do in life, here would be an area that's probably rich with possibilities for future careers. Future is definitely going to be the new. One of the new frontiers that we've unfortunately done a lot of spoiling to already. But so in other words, there's all kinds of changes. We don't even really know, like when you said anemones, I don't really know what they are, except I was fascinated by a picture of them as a child. So we don't know a lot about it. And on top of that, not knowing, the general public definitely not knowing, except for like Jaws, from the movie Jaws. Things are happening in that ocean that we don't know about that are causing it to change, and in some ways deleteriously, not to our benefit, not to the ocean's benefit. And to say the least of all the dirt and garbage and even radioactive spills and all the other problems, noise, and all the noise hurting the organisms from the sonars underwater, and so many things going on in the great big ocean that is greater than us by far. It's awesome, awesome, and will prevail in whatever form in the end. So you're here to tell us that pay more attention. What would you like the average person to be thinking?
Well, I would like the average person certainly to learn more about the ocean. If you're really interested, I do have what I call a hitchhiker's guide to introduced species or to exotic species, and it has some the pictures of many of the species I showed you, as well as some native species to help people identify them when they're in
the camera's not here anymore. Yeah, you can hold it up though. Yeah.
So that people can do this, and I think you gave them a website.
Yes, the website.
The website is on there.
Yeah.
I have other information about introduced species, a lot more information about ballast water, and some of the other work that we're doing with introduced species. We also are interested in other things as well. We do have some information on fisheries and Stellwagen Bank and so forth on the website. So if you're really interested in marine organisms, this is certainly something to do. And these are available to anybody who wants them. They can just email me or go to the website and ask for one.
And it would be a very profitable, beneficial, fruitful thing, fruit of the sea, so to speak, for children to be looking at and observing and investigating. Boy, there would be something to grab their interest and to their benefit and to the benefit of everybody else, keep them occupied and advancing themselves. So
we have there's a tide pool feeling tank in a place up in Gloucester. I think it's the Gloucester Natural Heritage. If you get up that way, there are some groups who go out and actually help us look for introduced species. So you can get involved in a lot of different ways. And that would be wonderful if you did.
And the ocean is so very awesome. And you know what I want to show? This is not about the ocean at all. The most amazing earrings. Henry, can you get a look at these most modern, amazing earrings? They don't show very well either. Very modern, very unique. You have to see them up close. Very, very modern. Very, very nice. Had to show them.
Thank you. They remind me of the ocean. They're blue, and they've got little round things that look like clams and
these,
so forth.
what she's wearing on her neck, come from Italy, but they sort of look like the ocean because some of the materials look similar to these tunicates that you talk about. Tunicates. Yes. And if you could see them, they're sort of translucent and so on. So she's very oceany. We love the ocean. We love life. Oh, the ocean is so awesome. The ocean is greater than anything on earth. The ocean will prevail. The ocean is magnificent and teaches us, just how marvelous life is and how insignificant we are and how important it is for us. We can do what we want. We can go the wrong way. But it's much better to be doing what's right and being the good stewards and not messing things up and letting the beauty and glory of what does exist continue on for eons as it would.
And that's one of the reasons why I had hoped that people would, begin to think about their pets their pet aquarium and not dump them back in the ocean or the fresh water. And, you know, that individuals can begin to take action themselves to make our world a better place, and certainly to prevent the ocean from becoming polluted, as it were, with these organisms that are biopolluters.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Pederson.
You're welcome.
And
it's a pleasure.
you showed us a lot of stuff. It has been a pleasure. And for me, an eye-opener, and I'm sure for you too. And we'll see you again next month here on Mother Nature, planet Earth, calling
This is